So there's been a lot of talk about the potential fight between WBO champion Brian Norman Jr. in the welterweight division going against the newly welterweight participant Devin Haney, who still hasn't officially been at welterweight yet, but get what I'm saying. He's at welterweight, right? There's been a lot of talks about them coming together for a clash, compliment to the boxing voice in particular, man. They had a lot of back and forth on there. That content was dope. But, I just have my doubts about the fight actually happening next, and I know a lot of people think that it is going to happen next. I'm just not convinced. And in this video, I'm going to tell you why.
If I tell you I'm good, probably you will say I'm boasting. But if I tell you I'm no good, you know I'm lying.
Yo, what's good, Boxing Talk family? Welcome back to your favorite boxing news channel, Dr. Boxing Talk. We are back for another YouTube video. Banger, man. Yes, sir. Yes, man. I know what time it is. The doctor's in the house, man. So check this out. But before we do, don't forget to smack that like button. As usual around here, let's do it together. That's what I'm talking about, man. See, it's harmless. You know what I'm talking about? And it helps us to keep going and growing like we're supposed to. You feel me? But yeah, so we have some news about Brian Norman Jr. He just recently landed the KO of the year candidate for sure. Definitely the KO of the year so far against Jin Sasaki when he took on the Japanese contender in his home country of Japan to defend his WBO title at welterweight division, And Brian Norman put on a show one time for Juneteenth. I'm talking about celebrate equality and love for everybody. And Jin Sasaki got some love, but respect to Jin Sasaki because he definitely demonstrated the heart of a champion, by going in there and wanting all the smoke, and Brian Norman did that, and shout out to him, the youngest champion in all the boxing right now, if I'm not mistaken, at 24 years old. So shout out to Brian Norman. He handled business. But of course, there comes with a target on your back when you do handle business, and the more your name grows, the more people want to step in the ring with you and take what you got. You know what I'm saying? That's just part of that's just how it goes. That's part of the territory of being a bigger name, and that's what he is now, right? So Devin Haney has appeared to be the next person that wants a Brian Norman or what he has, with Bill Haney doing his rounds and doing his tour and talking about they looking for Brian Norman, and Brian Norman Sr. and his son said, hey, I'm not too hard to find, just make sure that you're serious. And it seems like things got a little serious. Compliments of the boxing voice. I thought they did a great job of having both Bill Haney and Brian Norman Sr. represent themselves and each other and be able to talk it out. And seems like the fight is going to happen and it's going to be facilitated through Turki Al-Sheikh, right? But I would say, hold on, I have my doubts. And it's because we actually see them negotiating in real time to some extent. And I know that's good because it lets the fans know what's going on. But sometimes, in my personal opinion, a lot of times, the majority of the time, we don't need to know what's going on. Let the business be handled behind closed doors and behind the scenes. However, when you are essentially an independent entity, you don't have a big name like Matchroom and Eddie Hearn or PBC and Al Heyman or Bob Arum and Top Rank. You don't have Oscar De La Hoya, Golden Shower Promotions out there putting your name out there and promoting for you. Then you have to do it yourself. So it's like a give and take, a double-edged sword. It's the price you pay of being independent. You got to get out there and you got to handle some of the business that's traditionally held behind doors in front of everybody because everybody's on your head top. They're like, oh, why isn't this fight happening? But to me, what stood out to me was that, people were saying that their portion is signed. This person was saying, oh, my portion is not signed. Or what about this terms? What about the ring size? To me, that just screamed to me that it hasn't been fully negotiated yet. So maybe when Bill Haney was in and out of the interview, he was handling some things on his behalf and negotiating things and changing some things that may be beneficial to his fighter like he's supposed to do. And Brian Norman and his team are working on behalf of, Brian Norman Sr. and his team are working on behalf of Brian Norman like they're supposed to do. So to me, everything hasn't been hashed out. Everything hasn't been read. Everything hasn't been agreed upon because they were changing and altering things in real time. That's why it wasn't able to be solidified by both parties that is definitively happening. And a lot of people say, oh, this is duck talk. No, it's not duck talk, bro. That's how negotiations go. Every promoter does this. Eddie Hearn, when one of his matchroom fighters go to fight, they holler at Al Heyman and his PBC fighter, or Oscar De La Fishnets, Oscar De La Panty and his Golden Shower promotion fighter, or Bob Arum and his Top Rank fighter. They go and they hash out these things. They figure out, okay, bet you can have this, but we want this. It's a give and take. And if it doesn't happen, then they go their separate ways. All we're doing is looking at preliminary discussions in front of the camera. And you will say, oh, well, that's Bill Haney's fault. That's Brian Norman Sr.'s fault for putting their son out there. Well, that's what we asked for. So it's borderline exploitation. You see what I'm saying? Because they're trying to appease us and let them know, oh, we're not ducks, man. We're looking for the smoke. But at the same time, they're trying to go about their business as well to get their names out there. And if they don't do this and they're just sitting around not having a fight, then people will accuse them of ducking anyway. But then if they go and they have conversations in front of us and the fight doesn't come into fruition immediately, they're going to get called a duck anyway.
Every day
So it's like lose-lose. And I'm not saying feel bad for them. I'm just telling you this is why I doubt that the fight happens next. I'm not saying that the fight doesn't happen at all. I just don't think it happens next. And I'll even give you a bigger reason for it not to happen next. I could even argue that for Brian Norman, it'll be kind of silly for him to fight Devin Haney next without knowing what's going on between Mario Barrios and Manny Pacquiao, because Mario Barrios is the WBC welterweight champion, and Brian Norman has made it very clear, and he's been adamant about wanting to dominate his division. So I think it would behoove you to wait until the aftermath of the Barrios and Pacquiao fight, and then you try to see if you could get in there and fight the winner. Now, I don't think that this will happen. The reason why I have my doubts is because, like I said, with Eddie Hearn and Conor Benn, if you've been paying attention to this channel, Conor Benn, he wants to get in there for the WBC belt. He's been wanting Mario Barrios, he's been wanting Manny Pacquiao, and now that they're both fighting each other, I think Eddie Hearn, who magically has Conor Benn ranked number 3 in the WBC at the welterweight division, 147, whatever. But anyway, he's there. I think that is the perfect time for him to try to get Conor Benn the opportunity to fight the winner of that fight, and that'll give him an opportunity to get the WBC title. So, but in the scenario that doesn't happen, I think that Brian Norman Jr. should wait and see if he can get a unification, and see maybe Barrios's team, if they beat Pacquiao, would prefer to have a unification to go for another belt as opposed to fighting Conor Benn. Or maybe Manny Pacquiao's team, if he wins, we know Manny Pacquiao loves legendary stuff, maybe he would want to go and try to be unified at 46 years old, breaking another record. You never know. Like I said, I have my doubts. I think that Conor Benn will get the opportunity, but still, I think it's worth waiting and seeing what happens as opposed to fighting Devin Haney. No disrespect to Devin Haney. Outside of Devin Haney's big name, he doesn't really come with any hardware, or I would even say, it's debatable on which one's the legacy fight, because Devin Haney would still be a legacy fight for Brian Norman. Devin Haney being the youngest undisputed champion in the 4-belt era on the male side. Of course, Gabriela Fedora has that distinction in all of boxing in the 4-belt era. She's the youngest champion to be undisputed in the 4-belt era ever. Shout out to her. But Devin Haney is the youngest on the male side still, so that comes with legacy as well, and Devin Haney's still undefeated. But I'm saying that if you really want accolades in the sport, then I think that it would actually benefit you to not only get unified, but also fight a guy in Manny Pacquiao, who's also a legend, if he wins, or fight a guy in Mario Barrios, who's been in there he'll be in there with a legend like Pacquiao. He's been in there with a great fighter like Tank. He's been in there with a great fighter like Keith Thurman. So, that he has some legacy with him as well. So you could argue which one's better. For me, I love unification. So I would prefer, for me, the bigger legacy fight right now, especially with the doubts that Devin Haney has around him, with the ordeals that he's been involved with. I would argue that for me personally, Brian Norman, the bigger legacy fight would be against the winner of Mario Barrios and Manny Pacquiao for that unification. So like I said, nothing's guaranteed with that either, but I think that, don't be surprised if Devin Haney has somebody else. He may fight on Turkey's card in November, like the rumors are going around, right? But don't be surprised if he fights somebody else. And I don't think it's because he's ducking Brian Norman, but I know that's going to be the narrative. And same with Brian Norman. If Brian Norman somehow chooses to fight the unification between the WBC title holder Mario Barrios and Manny Pacquiao, what's wrong with that? Don't be surprised if that happens, but I know people are going to call him a duck. So I'm just saying that, sometimes it's kind of funny, but I think we should wait, because in real time, we were literally watching these negotiations happen. So, and you just see people ready to call somebody a duck or call somebody, say that they're scared. I have no reason to believe that Brian Norman is scared to fight Devin Haney, nor do I have too much reason to believe that Devin Haney would be scared to fight Brian Norman. Of course, we could understand him, but I want to give Devin Haney credit somewhat as well, because he is coming off of a win that people are trashing, right? Because let's face it, the fight was trash. I think people are going a little bit too hard on the performance and putting too much of the onus on him. I mean, he did what he was supposed to do. He boxed, right? And Jose Ramirez didn't box as well as Devin Haney. That's why Devin Haney won. But it was a boring fight. It was not entertaining. So I do give people that. But it was also a boxing a lesson as well. We got to give Devin Haney that. But thinking of that performance, which was questionable, right? People don't like it. Not questionable from a dominant standpoint, but questionable from an entertaining standpoint. And then the fight before that, people are saying that he has PTSD from being brutalized by the cheating racist Ryan Garcia. Then he has some questions to answer. And the fact that he's going against a young, explosive, powerful champion like Brian Norman, or he's even pursuing that next, with all of these demons and questions that he has to answer, I think I have to give him respect for that. If he's actually doing it. Now, you could play devil's advocate, be like, okay, he's just clout chasing. But if he's really sincerely willing to fight Brian Norman, we have to clap it up for Devin Haney, man. That would be a hell of a statement. And the same with Brian Norman, being 24 years old, traveling to Japan, defending his belt, you know, successfully against Jin Sasaki, and before that, successfully against the Puerto Rican Derek Cuevas. We got to salute him for also being willing to fight a fighter like Devin Haney, you know what I'm saying, of his status and stature. So I salute to both of them. I know people are going to think that I'm being too easy on them, but no, I'm just a fan of the sport. And I think these fights will come into place accordingly, and they'll happen when it's the appropriate time for them to happen. If it's next, that'd be great. But if it's not, that doesn't mean that either one of these fighters are scared to fight. They're pugilists by profession. I think that a lot of them are willing to fight. You know what I'm saying? It's not necessarily ducking. It's just that we expect a lot of these fights to be negotiated on camera in real time in front of us all, and just say, oh, well, the offer was sent and it was signed, so let's fight. That's not how it goes, man. There's a lot of give and take in these negotiations. It's just like anything being negotiated. Whether you go to buy a car, you negotiate. You know what I'm saying? Whether you're going for a new promotion or a new position, if you have the ability to be in a specialized field, you negotiate. I was just in negotiations for a salary for an engineering job that I have, you know, so or that was offered to me a couple times. So these things happen. It's been happening since I was in college and I graduated my PhD, and it still happens now. So there's always a negotiation phase with everything, and that's a business that's the business of boxing. So I think we need to acknowledge that more often and respect it, and respect the men that and the women that are coming out and trying to appease us and let us know that, hey man, we trying to make these fights and not always try to demonize or villainize one of the combatants. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, it's an easy target for Bill Haney because he be capping. I ain't gonna lie, he be capping, and Brian Norman Sr. be saying some questionable stuff. But we have to realize that they don't have big backing, and that's their choice. You know, they want to be independent. That comes with it. But at the same time, give them a bit of grace, you know, in my personal opinion, you know, because we'll say, oh, well, Bill Haney doesn't have to talk that much. That's why we don't like his son, or Brian Norman Sr. doesn't have to talk that much. Well, then guess what? If they didn't talk that much, you know what Brian Norman and Devin Haney will become? They'll become Terrence Crawford. Before Turkey Al-Sheikh got with Terrence Crawford, what did we say? Oh, we say, oh, he's not polarizing. He's not personable. You know, he doesn't have that dynamic of a personality. You know, he needs to be more outspoken. Well, then when he is outspoken, like Devin Haney and Bill, we say, oh, well, they be capping a lot, and they be, we just, oh, you can't win. You know what I'm saying? And I know that you're going to say, hold on, Doc, Brian Norman is with Top Rank. Yeah, but you don't see Top Rank and Bob Arum coming out in the forefront and speaking on their behalf. You know what I'm saying? Like they do for other fighters like Lomachenko, and, you know, like they did for Teofimo before and stuff like that. So I'm not saying that I know it sounds contradictory. I'm not saying that Brian Norman doesn't have the backing, because obviously he's with Top Rank, but we know about Bob Arum and his age and stuff like that. And I'm not even gonna blame it on age. It's just that Bob Arum's not. I mean, Brian Norman is not the guy that they wanted or anticipated to become the star. Let's be clear. Remember, he became a champion or interim champion when he upset Giovanni Santillan. So Brian Norman Sr. is accustomed to having to speak his opportunities into existence and let you know, hey man, I'm here. Don't overlook me. You know, so I don't think we should necessarily hold that against them now. That's what I'm saying. So I appreciate y'all rocking with me as always. Don't forget to smack that like button and let me know if you disagree. Am I tripping? Am I being too soft on them and too understanding, or are one of them actually are ducks for not fighting immediately like they say they will? Y'all let me know what y'all think about that in the comments, man. I appreciate y'all rocking. Don't forget to smack that like button again. And you know, y'all be easy. Remember, with God, we can do anything. Without God, we're nothing. The doctor's out. Peace. From the hood to college, both worlds they had to meet. 6 degrees between us, so cold, we're about to freeze. But we're Florida boys, hot takes, we bring the heat. We're moving the culture, the engineers to the streets.